Part 1, a bitter reunion. The cold wind bit at my skin as I stood at the edge of the village, the bag strap digging into my hand. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. My heart raced. I was trying to keep it together, to hold on to the calm I'd carefully built up, but everything inside me wanted to shatter. Then, there he was. Daniel. The last person I expected to see today, or ever again. My grip on my bag nearly slipped as my eyes locked onto his figure. His presence was as familiar as the bitter memories he carried with him. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't look away. He was standing there like he had every right to be. The same man who had once been everything to me, but now, he felt like a stranger. The weight of the past came rushing back, every promise broken, every tear shed, every word that had been said. And now, after everything, he was back, standing in front of me with that look in his eyes. "Anna," he whispered, as if saying my name could erase all the years of pain. I froze, the cold creeping into my bones. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel the bitterness in my mouth, the taste of anger I had long buried. How dare he show up like this, after everything? "Don't call me that," I said coldly, my voice steady, though my hands trembled. "We have nothing to do with each other anymore." His expression faltered, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped forward, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and something else, something I couldn't place. "Can we talk, just the two of us?" His voice was low, hesitant, as if he wasn't sure how I would respond. I looked over at Sophie, who was standing a few feet away, livid with rage. She was shouting something, but I couldn't make it out. My brother, too, was fuming, his fists clenched at his sides. It didn't matter. I had to face him, even if I didn't want to. I turned back to Daniel. "Fine. We'll talk." "Under that tree," I said, pointing to a large, lonely tree just a little ways off. "My brother and your little girlfriend can both see us from here." Daniel didn't say anything, but his face twisted in pain. He looked like a man caught in a storm, unsure of which way to turn. I could see it in his eyes, he was still the same man who had once torn my world apart. But now, there was something different. It wasn't the confident, assured man I remembered. No. This was a man who had been broken, a man who was lost. He turned and began walking toward the tree, slow and unsure. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment our eyes met, I saw it, the realization hit me hard. It wasn't just his voice, or the way he walked, that gave him away. It was his eyes. The way they looked at me, as if searching for something, anything, to make sense of the mess we had made. I knew it then. He was back, just like me. Reborn. But this Daniel wasn't the man I once knew. No. This was the Daniel of our past life. The one who was still young, still full of insecurities, still unsure of himself. The one who had never been able to see me for who I really was. I studied him as he stopped by the tree, his body tense. He wanted to say something, but I wasn't going to let him. I was done with words. "So, what is it, Daniel?" I asked, my voice sharp, cutting through the silence. "Why are you here?" His eyes searched mine, and I saw the pain there, the regret. But I didn't care. He had lost the right to make me feel anything. I followed you," he said slowly, his voice unsteady. "Before I came back, I knew you had fallen from the mountain. I don't know why it took me so long to get here. But I should have already been with you. We should have been married by now, Anna." I laughed, a bitter, empty sound. "But we're not. And we never will be." Daniel flinched, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else, something to try and fix everything. But I wouldn't let him. I couldn't. Not after all this time. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off, my voice cold as ice. "You're wasting your time. Just forget everything that happened. Pretend it was all a dream. Now that you're awake, go back to your princess." She's waiting for you. I watched as his expression shifted, the color draining from his face. He couldn't look at me. Not anymore. He didn't dare meet my eyes. I let out a mocking laugh. What, Daniel? You thought you could just sweep all of this under the rug and pretend nothing happened? You really think that? I know about your letters. I know what you said to her. How you told her you wanted children. A family. A life with her. His face paled further, and he opened his mouth, but no words came out. He couldn't defend himself. Not after everything. Not after the truth had been exposed. Do you really think I'm that stupid? I continued, my voice rising. You knew the doctor said I couldn't have children. So why would you go and tell her that? You're pathetic. Daniel started, but his voice cracked. It wasn't like that. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was insecure. I longed for something I thought I could never have. I shook my head, unable to suppress a cruel smile. And now you're here, begging for forgiveness. You're pathetic, Daniel. You always were. He dropped his head, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had crushed him. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Anna, I love you. I swear, I'll never stray again. I promise. Please. Please believe me. My heart did nothing. I didn't feel the old pull. I didn't feel the old hurt. Just emptiness. I pulled my hand away, letting it fall to my side, my fingers twitching with the urge to slap him, but I didn't. Instead, I laughed bitterly. Give me a break. A dog will always return to the bone, won't it? I'll never trust you again. His eyes filled with tears, and I could feel the weight of everything we had been through together crash over me. But I wouldn't let it stop me. I wouldn't let him win. I was never happy with you, Daniel, I said flatly. Not when we were poor. Not when we were rich. You were always so distant. So silent. It was like I was invisible to you. But I stayed. I stayed because I thought that was what I had to do. But I was wrong. I could see him trying to speak, but I didn't let him. I couldn't. Not anymore. I dreamed of a life without you, I whispered, my voice softer now. A simple life. A life where I could see my parents. Where I wasn't alone all the time. Where I wasn't waiting for a man who would never truly see me. Daniel opened his mouth again, but I raised my hand to stop him. No. There's nothing you can say. I'm leaving. I'm going to the county. This might be the last time we ever see each other. With that, I turned and walked away, my steps light, my heart finally free of the weight of him. Part 2, the unseen shadows. The road stretched out before me like an endless ribbon of dust, winding through the valley and disappearing over the horizon. My feet were sore from walking, but I didn't care. The sharp sting of pain was a welcome distraction from the emptiness that had settled in my chest. My mind kept replaying the conversation with Daniel, over and over again, like a bad dream I couldn't shake off. His words echoed in my mind, I love you. Please believe me. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, but I didn't need to hear it. I didn't want to hear it. I had already made my decision. I was done with him. And yet, something about that moment with him lingered in the air, a phantom presence that refused to leave me in peace. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. I could feel it in my bones. The calm I'd been clinging to since the accident was slipping through my fingers, and something darker was waiting just around the corner. A sharp breeze blew across the valley, stirring the trees into a whisper. My eyes followed the movement of the branches, trying to quiet my racing thoughts. I thought about Sophie, about how angry she was when she saw Daniel. She wasn't just furious, she was shaking with rage, her fists clenched tight as though she wanted to throw something at him. But she hadn't. She hadn't even said a word. I couldn't blame her. We both had the same reason to be angry. Daniel's return felt like an intrusion, a disruption of everything I had worked so hard to build for myself after all these years. The life I'd put together in the small village had been my escape, my sanctuary. It was mine, and no one, especially not Daniel, could take it from me. Yet, a part of me couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if things had turned out differently. What if we had made different choices? What if I hadn't left? The possibility swirled in my mind like a gust of wind, briefly lifting me from the ground, only to drop me back into the cold reality of what was. We couldn't go back. There was no undoing the damage. I quickened my pace, trying to outrun the memories, but the thoughts clung to me like a second skin. It was as if I could feel him behind me, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to look back. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. The past had already taken too much from me, and I wasn't willing to let it claim anything more. By the time I reached the small creek on the outskirts of the village, the sun was beginning to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the water. I stopped to rest, dipping my hands into the cool stream and letting the water rush over my fingers. I had to calm down. I had to clear my head. I heard a rustling behind me, but I didn't turn. Not this time. Whoever it was could pass me by. But the sound grew louder, and soon the soft crunch of footsteps reached my ears. I stiffened, instinctively drawing my bag closer to my side, my body on alert. "Anna," a voice called softly. My heart skipped a beat. That voice. I didn't need to look to know who it belonged to. "Go away, Daniel," I muttered, my voice low but firm. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of turning around. But the footsteps didn't stop. Instead, I heard him draw closer. His presence was like a weight in the air, pressing down on me, and I felt it settle into the pit of my stomach. I couldn't escape him, no matter how hard I tried. He stopped just behind me, so close I could feel the heat of his body through the chill of the evening air. I resisted the urge to turn and face him, to confront him. I wasn't ready for that. "Please," he said again, his voice rougher this time. "I just want to talk. I know you don't want to hear it, but I need you to understand. I never meant to hurt you." I sighed, trying to hold on to my composure. The last thing I needed was another one of his apologies. They were empty. They always had been. He had hurt me. He had torn my world apart, and no amount of words could undo that. "You're wasting your breath," I said flatly, still not turning. "You don't get to apologize for everything you've done. You made your choice, Daniel. Now live with it." The silence between us stretched long. I could almost feel the weight of his regret pressing down on me, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to be the one to fix things this time. Not anymore. "I know," he said quietly. "I know I don't deserve anything from you. But please, let me explain. Let me tell you why I did it." I shook my head, fighting the urge to look at him. "There's nothing to explain. You made your decision a long time ago. It's too late now." His voice dropped, almost a whisper. "It was never about you, Anna. It was about me. I didn't know what I was doing. I was scared. Scared of losing everything. You were always so much stronger than I was. And I couldn't stand it." I turned my head slightly, just enough to see him from the corner of my eye. He was standing there, his shoulders slumped, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. For a moment, I almost felt pity for him. Almost. "Stop," I said, my voice sharp. "Don't try to make yourself the victim here. You're not. You never were." There was a long pause, and I thought, just for a second, that he might leave me alone. But then I heard him take a step closer. I braced myself for whatever was coming next. "Anna," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to be the man you needed. I wasn't good enough for you then. But I swear, I'll be better. I'll do whatever it takes. Please, don't walk away from me. Don't walk away from us." His words hit me like a wave, crashing over me and pulling me under. I wanted to fight it, to push him away, but something inside me, a part one didn't even know existed, felt the pull. I felt his pain, his sincerity, and for a fleeting moment, I wanted to reach out and take his hand. But I didn't. Instead, I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me, and turned to face him fully. I met his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel the weight of everything he had taken from me. I felt the scars. I felt the bitterness. "I don't need you, Daniel," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "I needed you back then. But not now. Not anymore." His face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought he might break right in front of me. But he didn't. He stood tall, though the look in his eyes betrayed him. "I know," he whispered. "I know. I just wanted to say, goodbye." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone by the creek, the water rushing past me as though it had no care in the world. Part 3. The unraveling threads. The night fell quickly, draping the village in a blanket of darkness that seemed to suffocate everything in its path. I stood by the creek for a long time, watching the water flow by, its surface glistening under the pale light of the moon. Everything felt still, but inside, I could feel the storm brewing. I wasn't sure where it came from or what it meant, but I knew it was coming. I could sense it like a distant thunderclap on the horizon, waiting to strike. I turned to leave, my legs carrying me back toward the village without thinking. My mind was lost in a haze of confusion, swirling between the past and present, between what was real and what I wished could be real. Daniel's words echoed in my head again, "I'll do whatever it takes. Please, don't walk away from us." The sincerity in his voice had shaken me, even though I'd told him I didn't need him. I had said those words with conviction, but deep down, part of me had wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that somewhere inside, the person he had once been still existed. That the love we had shared could be salvaged, or at least acknowledged. But I knew better than that. I had learned to guard my heart. To lock away the parts of myself that could be broken. The village looked different in the dark. The houses seemed smaller, more distant, as if the night had somehow stolen their warmth. I passed the bakery where I used to work as a child, its windows dark and empty. The streets were silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the trees. As I walked, I caught sight of the old church up on the hill. Its steeple stood tall against the night sky, a silhouette of shadow and stone. I used to visit the church often when I first moved back to the village, seeking solace in its quiet halls. But now, it felt like another world, a place I no longer belonged. I kept walking, the sound of my footsteps muffled against the dirt road. But then, I heard something. A soft rustling behind me, followed by the unmistakable crunch of gravel underfoot. My breath caught in my throat, and I instinctively spun around. Standing there, just a few feet away, was Sophie. She looked different somehow. Her eyes, usually so sharp and full of life, were dull with exhaustion, and there was a tension in her posture that I hadn't noticed before. Her shoulders were hunched, her hands clasped tightly together in front of her. She looked like she had been waiting for me, like she had something important to say. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other in silence. The weight of everything we had been through together hung between us like a thick fog. I had expected her to be angry after what had happened with Daniel. After all, she had every right to be. But there was something more in her gaze. Something deeper. "Sophie," I said softly, breaking the silence. "What are you doing here?" She took a step closer, her eyes scanning my face as though searching for something. "I should ask you the same thing," she replied, her voice low and guarded. I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Sophie took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly as she ran them through her hair. "I saw you earlier. With him. Daniel. And I don't know what to think anymore, Anna." My heart skipped a beat. The last thing I needed was another confrontation about Daniel. "Sophie, no, let me finish," she interrupted, her voice rising slightly. I'm not angry with you. I'm angry with myself. I should have been there for you, Anna. I should have seen what was going on, but I didn't. And now, everything is falling apart. I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came. Instead, I just stood there, watching her, as she continued to speak, her words tumbling out faster now, as though she couldn't stop them. I didn't want to believe that Daniel was the one who did all of this. But I saw it. I saw how he hurt you. I saw how much you loved him, and how much he didn't deserve it. She paused, her eyes growing wet. And I let him get away with it. I should have said something sooner, but I didn't. I was too scared. Scared of losing you, scared of losing the friendship we had. Sophie's words hit me harder than I expected. I had always known that she cared about me, that she wanted the best for me, but hearing her admit that she had been afraid of losing me, it shook me. It made me realize just how fragile everything was. I never wanted to hurt you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. But I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to fix any of this. Sophie's expression softened, and she stepped closer to me. You don't have to fix it, Anna. Not by yourself. You don't have to carry all of this alone. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself relax. Sophie was here. She was still here, despite everything that had happened. She hadn't abandoned me, and that realization brought a strange comfort. I took a shaky breath, finally allowing myself to look at her fully. I don't even know where to start. Everything's a mess. Sophie gave a small, knowing smile. We'll start where we always do, she said gently. Together. We stood there for a long moment, neither of us speaking. It felt as though we were trying to find our way back to each other, to the bond that had once been so strong. But something was different now. I could feel it in the air, in the tension between us. We were both standing on the edge of something we couldn't fully understand yet. Suddenly, the soft glow of a lantern caught my eye from up the hill, just beyond the church. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned instinctively to look. It was faint, but there, flickering in the distance. A single light, moving slowly through the darkness. Sophie followed my gaze, her brow furrowing. Do you see that? She asked, her voice suddenly tinged with concern. I nodded, my stomach twisting with unease. Who would be out there at this time of night? Sophie bit her lip, her gaze fixed on the light. I don't know, but we should check. Something doesn't feel right. I didn't hesitate. Whatever it was, whatever was drawing me toward that flickering light, I had to find out. We couldn't ignore it, not now, not after everything that had happened. Part 4. The shadow in the distance. The air was thick with anticipation as Sophie and I moved toward the flickering light. Our footsteps seemed too loud in the silence of the night, and the sound of our breathing was all I could hear apart from the occasional rustle of leaves or the soft chirping of distant birds. Every instinct in me screamed that something was off, that whatever was out there in the darkness was not something we were meant to find. But despite the unease gnawing at my gut, I couldn't stop walking. There was something compelling about that light, something that made my feet move even though my mind screamed to turn back. Sophie didn't say much, but I could feel her presence beside me, the weight of her concern pressing against me. As we got closer to the hill, the light grew more distinct, pulsing like a heartbeat in the distance. It was low to the ground, as though someone was carrying it or setting it down every few steps. The flicker was steady, but there was something odd about it, an unnatural rhythm to the way it shone, as if it wasn't meant to be seen at all. Should we call someone? Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't like this, Anna. I looked at her, my heart pounding, but I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let my eyes linger on the hill, trying to figure out who, or what, was responsible for the light. The more I stared, the more it seemed like the person carrying the lantern was getting closer. Let's just see who it is, I said, trying to mask the unease in my voice. If it's someone we know, then we'll be fine. Sophie nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. Still, she followed me as we made our way up the steep incline of the hill, the lantern's glow growing more intense as we approached. It wasn't until we reached the crest of the hill that we finally saw him. A man, dressed in a long coat that seemed too heavy for the season, stood just a few feet ahead of us. He was facing the church, the lantern in his hands casting a weak glow against the cold stone of the building. His back was turned to us, but the shape of his shoulders, broad and tense, made it clear that he was aware of our presence. Sophie and I froze, not knowing whether to speak or not. The figure didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the church, his face hidden in shadow. Who are you?" Sophie asked, her voice louder now, breaking the silence between us. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his head slightly, enough for us to catch a glimpse of his profile. His features were sharp, angular, with a deep furrow between his brows. The lantern flickered again, and for a split second, I thought I saw something in his eyes, something familiar, though I couldn't place it. "You shouldn't be out here," the man finally spoke, his voice low, but tinged with a strange urgency. "It's not safe. Not tonight." Sophie and I exchanged a look. There was something about the way he spoke that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the undertone of warning, of fear. "Why?" I asked before I could stop myself. "What's going on? Who are you?" The man hesitated, as though weighing his words carefully. For a moment, he said nothing, but his gaze flicked to the church, then back to us. "You're not supposed to know," he muttered, almost to himself. "But it's too late now. There's no turning back." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach, and I felt my breath catch in my chest. What was he talking about? Turning back from what? Sophie stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Who are you?" she demanded again. "What do you know about this?" The man let out a slow breath, lowering the lantern to the ground. He didn't seem to want to engage with us any longer, but he knew he couldn't walk away either. "My name is Isaac," he said quietly, his eyes flicking nervously from side to side. "But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you need to leave. Now." "Leave?" I echoed, confused. "Leave where? What's going on here?" Isaac seemed to hesitate again, glancing over his shoulder at the church. The air around us felt charged, like a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon. "You don't understand," he said finally, his voice tinged with desperation. "They've been watching. They know you're here." I took a step closer, my curiosity piqued despite the fear gnawing at me. "Who's watching? Who knows?" Isaac's face tightened, as though he was considering whether or not to tell us more. He took another step backward, as though he couldn't bear to stay in one place too long. "The church," he whispered. "It's not just a place of worship. It's a place of control. They've been using it for centuries, hiding in plain sight." Sophie and I exchanged a look, both of us trying to process what Isaac was saying. "The church? What could he possibly mean?" "What do you mean by they?" I asked, my voice trembling with both curiosity and fear. Isaac glanced at me as though he were trying to gauge my response. "The ones who come after the innocent," he said, his voice barely audible. "The ones who take people away. The ones who make them disappear." His words felt like a cold slap to the face. Disappear? People didn't just disappear. Not in a small town like ours. It was impossible. But then I thought of all the strange occurrences lately. People had been acting different, more distant, more secretive. The kind of oddities that might have seemed trivial at first glance, but suddenly, under Isaac's words, they began to take on a darker tone. Isaac took a deep breath, his eyes shifting nervously once again. "You need to leave, now," he repeated, his voice low and urgent. "It's too dangerous to stay here. The church has its eyes on you, and if you're not careful, you might become one of them." Sophie grabbed my arm, her grip tight with fear. "Anna, we need to go. Now." But something inside me was pulling me forward. I couldn't just walk away from this. There was something Isaac wasn't saying, something important, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. Tell me more, I demanded. What are you talking about? What's really going on here? Isaac's face twisted in frustration. You won't believe me, he muttered. You'll never believe me until it's too late. Before either Sophie or I could say anything else, Isaac turned and fled down the hill, disappearing into the night before we could react. The flicker of the lantern was swallowed by the darkness, leaving only the lingering echoes of his warnings in the air. Sophie and I stood there, speechless, the weight of his words hanging between us. Do you think he was telling the truth? Sophie whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The doubt in my heart was growing, and with it, a terrible certainty that Isaac had been trying to tell us something we weren't ready to hear. But we couldn't turn back now. Whatever was happening in the church, whatever Isaac had warned us about, was just beginning. Part 5, The Veil unfolds. The following days passed in a haze, as if the world had shifted slightly out of focus. Everything seemed the same, but nothing felt right. The small town we had grown up in, the one we thought we knew inside and out, suddenly felt foreign, as though it was a stage and we were merely actors playing our parts. Sophie and I didn't talk much about the man in the long coat, Isaac, or the warnings he had given us. It was as though something invisible was holding us back from saying his name aloud. We both knew, deep down, that whatever he had been trying to warn us about was far from over. But every time we even hinted at it, the air around us thickened, making it harder to breathe, harder to think clearly. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my mind racing with fragmented images, Isaac's shadowy figure, the flickering lantern, the unease in his voice as he warned us to leave. But no matter how much I tried to shake the thoughts from my head, they lingered like a persistent ache in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't until that Saturday morning, when the fog hung thick over the town, that I knew things were truly changing. Sophie had insisted we visit the church again. She wanted answers I wasn't sure we could find, but I couldn't say no to her. So, we walked together, side by side, down the now familiar cobblestone streets, the morning mist swirling around us like the remnants of a forgotten dream. The church stood at the edge of town, as it always had. Its steeple loomed high above the rooftops, the cross at the top casting a shadow that stretched far across the cemetery. The place had always been a symbol of peace, of comfort, a place where people came to seek solace. But now, to me, it felt more like a watchtower, an imposing structure keeping an eye on us all. We're not going inside, right? Sophie asked, her voice tight with anxiety. She glanced at the heavy oak doors of the church as if expecting them to swing open at any moment, revealing the darkness within. No, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure why I was so adamant about it. We just need to look around. See if anything's changed. It felt wrong, standing outside in the fog, staring at the place we'd both grown up around, a place that had never seemed sinister until now. The windows were dark, almost too dark, as if they were hiding something. The iron fence that surrounded the cemetery was in disrepair, with several bars bent or twisted out of shape. It looked like no one had cared for it in years, and yet, the church itself was pristine, almost impossibly so. As we approached the main gates, a sudden chill brushed against my skin, making me shiver. The fog thickened, and the world around us seemed to dissolve, the sounds of the town fading into an eerie silence. I tried to brush off the sense of dread that crept up my spine, but it clung to me like a shadow, whispering that we were being watched. Sophie stepped closer to me. What do you think's going on here? You think Isaac's right? Do you think the church has something to do with whatever's happening? I didn't know how to answer. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Isaac's warnings echoed in my ears, they've been watching. They know you're here. But who were they? And how could something so insidious, so impossible, be hidden under the very roof of a place people trusted? I don't know, I muttered. But I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something. Something important. We paused at the gates, both of us staring at the church, our feet planted in the wet grass. My heart raced in my chest, the silence pressing down on us like a heavy weight. And then, without warning, the door creaked open. Neither of us had seen anyone approaching, but there it was, a slow, deliberate motion, the door swinging open just a few inches. No one was visible inside, but the faint sound of footsteps echoed through the doorway. Sophie let out a shaky breath. "Do you see that?" I nodded, my mouth dry. My eyes stayed fixed on the open door, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to leave before it was too late. But something inside me, the same feeling that had pushed me forward the other night, kept me rooted to the spot. "Should we go in?" Sophie asked, almost in a whisper, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I didn't answer right away. My mind raced with a dozen different thoughts, none of them clear. But one thing stood out: Isaac had warned us not to enter the church, not to get too close. And yet, I couldn't help but wonder why. What was it that he was trying to protect us from? We had to know. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "Yes. We're going in." The door creaked again as we pushed it open, the sound echoing through the church like a warning bell. The air inside was thick with the smell of old wood and dust, and the faintest hint of something I couldn't quite identify, a strange, metallic scent that made my stomach turn. As we stepped into the darkness, the door slammed shut behind us. I whipped around, my heart leaping into my throat. Sophie jumped too, her face pale. "What the hell?" she gasped. The door just, before she could finish, the light from outside seemed to fade away entirely. The church was plunged into an oppressive darkness. No candles flickered. No lamps illuminated the pews. Only the faintest light from the cracked windows allowed us to make out shapes in the gloom. Then, a sound, distant at first, but growing louder. Footsteps. Steady, deliberate footsteps. I turned toward the sound, my breath shallow. In the far corner of the church, near the altar, a figure appeared from the shadows. Tall, cloaked in a dark robe, and moving with a fluidity that was unsettling. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaky. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it lifted a hand, as though beckoning us forward. "Sophie," I whispered, my voice trembling. "We need to get out of here." But it was too late. The figure stepped forward, and the faint light from the window flickered, illuminating its face. No, not a face. A mask. A smooth, featureless mask, as white as bone, and glowing faintly in the darkness. And in that moment, I knew. I knew that we had walked right into whatever nightmare Isaac had warned us about. Whatever had been hiding in the shadows of this town, it was real. It was waiting for us. Part 6. The masked truth. The figure in the cloak stepped toward us, its movements fluid and unnatural, as though it existed outside the rules of the world we knew. My pulse hammered in my chest, each beat a thundering reminder of the danger we were in. Sophie and I stood frozen, barely able to move, trapped by the suffocating darkness that seemed to close in on us. The only sound in the church was the soft shuffle of the figure's feet on the stone floor, each step echoing like a warning. "Sophie," I whispered, barely able to force the words out. "Do you see that?" She nodded slowly, her face pale and stricken with fear, her lips trembling as she clung to the edge of my sleeve. But neither of us moved. We couldn't. Our legs were as if cemented to the ground, paralyzed by the cold terror that crept through us. The figure came to a stop in the center of the church, just beyond the altar. Its head tilted to one side, as if studying us, and the faint light from the cracked windows caught the edge of the mask. For a moment, it glowed even brighter, the bone-white surface almost blinding in its intensity. Then, without a sound, it raised a hand, a thin, skeletal hand, and pointed directly at us. The gesture was deliberate, calculated. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. Sophie took a shaky step back, her voice barely a whisper. "What do they want? What is this? Why are they pointing at us?" I didn't know the answer. All I knew was that the mask held an otherworldly power, an unsettling pull that gripped me and kept me from turning away. The fear coursing through my veins was suffocating, yet I found myself compelled to take a step forward, almost against my will. "Stay back," I hissed, grabbing Sophie's arm to keep her from moving. "We have to get out of here now." But Sophie wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on the figure, her gaze locked onto that unnerving, glowing mask. I think we need to listen. We need to understand." My heart stopped. I could hear her words, but I didn't recognize the voice that spoke them. It was as though something deep inside her was shifting, like a darkness was stirring behind her eyes. She was being drawn in, just as I had been, but I had no idea why. "Sophie, don't," I pleaded, but it was too late. She shook off my grip and took a hesitant step toward the figure. Before I could stop her, the figure raised its other hand, as though it had anticipated her movement. A low hum began to fill the room, vibrating through the floor, the walls, my bones. It was the same eerie hum I had heard the night of the festival, but this time it was stronger, more intense. The sound seemed to reverberate inside my head, drowning out everything else, and I could feel my thoughts starting to slip away. I tried to call out to Sophie again, but my voice was swallowed by the hum. The air around us grew thick, heavy with an oppressive force that I could neither understand nor resist. My feet felt rooted to the spot, and I couldn't move. Panic surged within me, but it was tangled in confusion. Why was Sophie walking toward the figure? Why couldn't I stop her? "Sophie!" I shouted, but the sound barely left my lips. I was trapped in this strange, suffocating haze. She didn't look back. Her eyes were wide, and her face seemed expressionless, almost vacant. It was as though something had taken hold of her, controlling her every move. When Sophie reached the figure, it lowered its hand slowly, and the hum ceased abruptly. For a moment, there was complete silence, the kind that presses in on your ears and makes your heartbeat sound unnaturally loud. The figure didn't speak. It didn't need to. Instead, it slowly reached out and placed its cold, bony hand on Sophie's shoulder. She flinched at the touch, but there was no fear in her eyes. Just a strange, empty calm, as though she were in a trance. "Sophie!" I screamed, fighting the invisible grip that held me. But it was no use. My voice cracked in the still air, and my body refused to move. I was powerless. The figure leaned closer to Sophie, its masked face hovering just inches from hers. I couldn't see its eyes, but somehow, I knew it was watching her, studying her, like it had seen something in her, something I couldn't comprehend. Then, without warning, the mask's features began to shift. The smooth, white surface of the mask rippled like liquid, twisting and distorting, until it formed a face. A face that was impossibly familiar. My breath caught in my throat. It was my own face, my eyes, my mouth, my expression, twisted and warped into something unrecognizable. But it was me, and I felt a sickening surge of fear wash over me. "Sophie!" I shouted again, but she didn't respond. She was no longer looking at the figure. Her gaze was fixed on the mask, on the distorted reflection of my face that stared back at her from beneath the surface. It didn't make sense. The figure wasn't just some anonymous entity. It was showing her my face, but twisted, distorted, like a mirror shattering into 1,000 pieces. What did it want with her? What was this thing, really? Before I could make sense of anything, the figure's hand shifted from Sophie's shoulder to her neck, and I saw her gasp. Not in fear, but in realization. It was as though a veil had been lifted from her mind, and in that moment, I saw her expression change. Her eyes widened, and her lips parted as though she were trying to speak, but no words came out. The figure stepped back, allowing Sophie to take a shaky breath. Her hands trembled as she placed them on her temples, her face contorting in confusion and disbelief. I could hear her voice in the silence, barely a whisper. It's me." The words made no sense, but they struck me like a bolt of lightning. Sophie was no longer standing in front of the figure, lost in its strange grip. She was standing there, frozen, as if seeing something, feeling something, that I couldn't comprehend. "What did it show you?" I asked, desperate for answers, for anything that could explain the terror gripping us both. Sophie slowly turned to face me, her eyes wide with confusion and terror. It showed me who I really am. I didn't understand. I couldn't. But Sophie had changed. She wasn't the same person she had been before we walked into this church. Something had shifted inside her, something dark and ancient. And I feared we were too late to stop it. The figure stepped back again, its face still hidden beneath the shifting mask, its movements slow and deliberate, as if waiting for something to happen. I didn't know what that something was. But I knew one thing for certain, we were no longer alone in this church. Whatever had been hidden beneath the surface of our town, beneath the surface of Sophie and me, had begun to wake up. And it was coming for us. Part 7, the final revelation. The air in the church was thick with a chilling energy, a weight that pressed down on us from all sides. I could feel the walls closing in, the shadow of the figure growing longer, consuming the space around us. It was like the very church was alive, its ancient stones breathing with a life of their own, reacting to the presence of whatever dark force had awakened. Sophie stood motionless, her expression one of complete detachment. The fear I had seen in her before had vanished, replaced by something colder, something I couldn't place. She wasn't the same Sophie. I couldn't recognize her anymore. Sophie, talk to me. I pleaded, stepping forward despite the fear that clung to my every movement. Tell me what happened. What did it show you? She blinked slowly, as though she was waking from a dream, her eyes still fixed on the figure. But there was something different in her gaze now, a depth of knowledge that wasn't there before. It showed me the truth, she said softly, her voice hollow, like it wasn't truly hers. The truth about everything. About us. About why we're here. My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't understand what she meant, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever the figure had shown her was something I wasn't ready to know. What truth? I whispered, my voice trembling. What are you talking about, Sophie? She turned to me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. It was as if she was trying to reach out to me, trying to find herself again in the midst of the darkness. But then the moment passed, and her gaze turned cold once more. You don't understand, she said, her voice almost distant. I've always known, deep down. But I never wanted to face it. My confusion deepened, but something else stirred inside me. Something primal, something instinctive. I couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, the moment I was standing in, was the culmination of something far greater than either of us could comprehend. Face what? I asked, stepping closer, desperate for some kind of explanation. Sophie didn't answer. Instead, she turned back toward the figure in the center of the room. The mask, still shifting and contorting, now seemed to pulsate with an eerie energy, the glowing lines brighter than ever. It was as though it was feeding off of the tension in the air, feeding off the fear that we hadn't yet fully realized. And then, as if sensing my question, the figure finally spoke. You have both come to the end, it said, its voice low and resonant, like the sound of a distant bell tolling in the dark. And now you will know the truth. I froze in place, my heart racing. The voice was unnatural, as though it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The words seemed to echo in my mind, reverberating in my skull, as though they were being planted there. What do you mean? I demanded, my voice growing louder with the fear that was steadily rising inside me. What truth? What's happening here? The figure tilted its head slightly, its mask glowing brighter, and for a moment, I could swear that it was laughing, though no sound came from its mouth. The laughter, if it could even be called that, was in the air, in the very pulse of the room. You've been blind, all of you, it said softly, almost sadly. But it is time to awaken. And then, in an instant, everything changed. The church seemed to shift, the walls warping around me, the floor beneath my feet becoming unstable. The air grew cold, biting at my skin, and I could feel the very fabric of reality twisting. Sophie took a step forward, her movements slow, deliberate, as if she were being pulled by an invisible force. I reached out for her, but before I could touch her, the room erupted into a blinding light. For a moment, I thought I had gone blind. The light was so intense, so pure, that it seared my eyes. I could no longer hear anything, no voices, no hum, no sound at all. There was nothing but the blinding light, swallowing me whole, consuming everything around me. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the light faded. I opened my eyes, my head spinning. But when I looked around, I was no longer in the church. I was in a different place entirely. The landscape stretched out before me, vast and endless, bathed in a soft, eerie glow. The ground was cracked, jagged, and barren, as though the earth itself had been ravaged by time. There were no trees, no signs of life. Just the remnants of a once thriving world, now hollow and desolate. Sophie stood a few paces away from me, her back turned, facing the horizon. She was different now. She looked taller, more regal, as if she had transformed into something beyond human. "Sophie!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with fear. "Where are we? What is this?" She didn't turn around. But she spoke, her voice eerily calm. "This is where it all began. This is where the truth is." I took a step forward, my legs unsteady beneath me. "What do you mean? What truth? What's happening to you?" Sophie finally turned to face me, and when she did, I saw the truth that the figure had shown her. Her eyes were no longer her own. They were black as midnight, empty and hollow. Her face was no longer that of the girl I had known all my life. It was something older, something ancient, with a strange, cruel wisdom behind it. "You've always known," she said, her voice a whisper now. "We are the descendants of something ancient, something that has waited for centuries to rise again." I shook my head, unable to comprehend what she was saying. "No, that can't be true. What are you talking about? This isn't you." But Sophie only smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile that sent chills down my spine. "The mask," she continued. "It's not just a mask. It's a key. A key to the truth, to everything. And now, we've opened the door." I wanted to scream, to run, to escape from this nightmare. But I knew, deep down, that there was nowhere left to run. The truth had been revealed, and there was no undoing it. I didn't know if I could stop it, or if I even wanted to anymore. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. Sophie stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "It's time for you to join us," she said, her words final, unyielding. And as she reached out to me, I understood. The truth was not just about Sophie. It was about me, too. About us all. We were never meant to escape. We were always meant to return.